And I thought what we could do is take a look at some arguments where look at some arguments that involve multiple quantifiers and work on that, and then we can go into, if we want, some translations. We could talk about invalid arguments, right? So we're at a point where we're basically building up our skill set through practice. Okay, so I went ahead and pulled up the rule sheet that we have for our quantifiers, our quantifier rules. And then in the background, there's also our truth functional rules. We can toggle if we want. And I actually didn't do this one in advance, so let's see what happens. Okay, so as far as strategies go, we want to think in terms of obviously what we want, which is an existential claim. That's the governing quantifier in the conclusion. And what we're given, we've got a universal claim at number 2, but we have an existential at number 1. And we know that given that we cannot, for existential elimination, use a name already in use, if we were to peel off or instantiate or eliminate the universal at line 1 first, and then move into an existential elimination of line, sorry, I said line 1, I meant to say line 2. If we were to peel off or instantiate or eliminate the universal at line 2, and then move into an existential elim of line 1, we'd run into an error, right? Because we'd be using a name, potentially we'd be using a name already in use. So the safest bet for us is to go ahead and eliminate the existential at line 1. That still leaves us with the universal as well as another existential, and where's our X? Okay, it's at the end. Okay, and then we know what we want, which is the existential, the universal, right? So that we can exit y, x. Why are you not liking this? Oh, because I don't have the predicate. I'm going to try and copy paste, although I often find that it doesn't work. Okay, it's not working. Okay, so the basic idea here is we're setting up our strategy at the outset. And remember something that we've talked about before. It doesn't matter whether you're working in chapters, in chapter 6 and 8, that is the natural deduction exercises, or you are working in quantifier logic. It's a really good idea when you set up your structuring subproof, your roadmap, your template, to go ahead and tell yourself in advance what you're doing, so that when you get there, if you've forgotten what you had started, you're reminded by the fact that you'd already written it out. Now, as we're working backward, still, let's think about line 7 as our new conclusion. So presumably we have the universal and I'll go ahead and just use the name A, so that we generalize from that to the existential, right? And now we see at line 6 that we want to generate a universal. And so we're going to think about generating that universal by way of universal intro. We have to use the name that's not already in use. So, whoops, sorry about that. Hold on. So we pick a new name. And by the way, I hope that it's clear that I haven't done anything about reading the sentences out, trying to effectively make ordinary English sentence out sense, sorry, out of these quantified sentences. I'm just looking at my quantifiers and the way that they roam over variables, and I'm looking at the order of the quantifiers because I have multiple quantifiers that are mixed, and I'm setting up my strategy that way, right? So there's a sense in which what I'm doing is very mechanical, right? I'm not worrying about or thinking about how to understand what I'm reading beyond thinking about what the rules tell me to do. For some of us, that's the way to go. For some of us, that's frustrating because it feels like that it's hard to know how to employ the rules if we don't understand what we're looking at. So I do understand that this approach may not work for everybody. All right, so here again, we're thinking about a universal intro. Okay, and now I'm going to ask myself how I'm going to start um, peeling off the quantifiers at lines 2 and 3 so that I can start making my way to the sentence B is A to A, right? And I don't know what that predicate, relational predicate means, right? So notice that in both lines 2 and lines 3, I have universal quantifiers. I would just go ahead and instantiate them or eliminate them in order if I'm not quite sure yet how I'm going to get what I want. So if I want to stick with the hypothetical names I already have, I can. Why? Because there's no restriction on the elimination of the universal, right? And I don't really know yet how I'm going to need to orient my hypothetical names, right? So that I can end up with the variables that I want. So let me just pull them off and see what I have. So from line 2 to line 5, I'll have existential Z, and then A, I'll just go ahead and make it B, Z. And I can do the same at from line 3. So I'll take existential Z, A, and again I'll say B, Z. Oh, I need another, sorry about that, another parenthesis. Right? And then oh, sorry, so here we have this guy that we have, this line 3 that we have eliminated. And eliminated the universal. Okay. And we don't yet know how we've got this animal. Now, is it fair to say that Oh, sorry. Take a look at line 3 and line 6. Do you guys notice the error that I've made with the parentheses? Can anybody point that out? And by the way, I had not that error, but take a look at the open paren at line 3. Take a look at the open paren at line 6. And does it make sense to you when I say I didn't realize that I had a mistake until I looked at lines 5 and 6 and said, oh yeah, I want to go ahead and eliminate the conditional, right? So is everybody seeing this? Look at what I've just highlighted at line 6. Notice that the open paren now means that that existential is supposedly roaming across the entire sentence, which means that the conditional is covered by the existential. But look at line 3, in fact, when you peel off, it's the universal quantifier that ranges over the entirety of the sentence, which means that the universal covers the arrow, covers the conditional. And so if I maintain my mistake at line 6, I'm not going to be able to work my conditionally limb. But check this out, soon as I fix my mistake, and it's not the case that I do not have a well-formed formula. I do have a well-formed formula because this existential covers its variable. And now I'm in a position to eliminate. Okay. Now I didn't check stuff off as I went. Let's see, do we have any issues? No. Okay, now before moving on, talk to me about whether or not the approach that I used works for you. Which is to say, remember I said to you guys, hey, here's an argument. I haven't worked through this myself. Well, let's just throw it in there and deploy our strategies, where the strategy we deployed was based on what we're trying to achieve, as well as what has to be done in terms of the elimination order. And does it make sense to say that when we set stuff up, we kept working backward, and by the time we were done working backward with our superstructure and our substructure, right? By way of the subproof and nested subproof, we basically had everything done for us. There were just a couple of elements to fill in.
I have a question for how you had multiple quantifiers. For each quantifier, will there be a subproof for each one? Because there was X, Y, and Z, and then there's 3 subproofs that you do.
So Deb, the short answer is not very helpful, I don't think, which is it depends. It depends on what those quantifiers are, right? In other words, when we know that when we must pull off an existential, we're going to have to generate a subproof. When we want to generate a universal, we must begin a subproof, right? So in this case, right, remember we've only got the 2 subproofs, not 3.
Oh, so it's only for the existential.
We chose the existential limb. So let me go ahead and write existentially limb as our structuring subproof. That's line 1 sets it off, line 3 begins it, and line 9 ends it. But then the nested subproof is a universal intro.
Right.
So does it make sense to say we were working our way from the interior quantifier to the exterior quantifier? I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
you're working from the inside, working your way out.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, uh-huh. And then of course, as you know, when we're eliminating, we work from the outside in,
Oh, okay.
right?
Okay.
So in my view, so for in terms of my own experience, what I find tricky is just, oh my gosh, there's so much to look at. And my first um, thought is to want to really make sense of each sentence. And I might struggle quite a bit with that because reading a sentence from notation out back into ordinary English can be tricky. And it's easy, we've seen this already, it's easy to make a mistake about the logical structure because we import some of our ways of thinking about ordinary English. So what I do then, if I say to myself, well, I know my rules, I got my rules, what are my rules going to tell me to do? That's been a great way for me to get to wrap my head around uh, otherwise complicated looking animals. In addition, for me, understanding what the rules mean then helps me to read back into an argument itself, right? As opposed to trying to start from reading the argument back into ordinary English and then employ the rules. Okay, so let's do this. Let's try another one that's maybe less visually complicated and that I hope makes you feel comfortable. Let's try this one. We'll see how it goes. Again, I haven't done it. I steal from other places and then usually try to work through them before we meet, but I don't always get to do that. All right, so here we've got existential T and universal P, then QXY. Second premise says some PRX. And do what you did before. Thank you very much, which is when you did do it, is, tell me when if I've overlooked something, because it's fairly common for me to do. And then we have existential. And, oops, and another existential. We can also, if it makes you feel like things are a little less hard to look at, what did I just do? Existential QYX. Yeah, okay, sorry. Is we can always replace the predicates with, our blocks language, for example. Okay, so here's another case where we've got our existentials and as our premises, and we have an existential as our conclusion. So if I'm just working backward, and I know I'm probably going to have to delete some steps in order to set up what needs to be set up. But if I think about what it is that I want to achieve, I'm going to try and copy and paste and hope it works, but it doesn't. I really wish I could understand what I'm doing wrong, such that sometimes I copy paste successfully and sometimes I don't. right? So presumably from line, what is now line 6 to 7, we have an existential intro, right? Which means that the variable x is replacing some name or other, but we already have the nested existential quantifier that ranges over the variable y. So we'd have this, let's say A, I'm just grabbing the name A, and then our existential y, y, A, right? And then the question is, of course I have to put the predicate Q. The question is, all right, how did I get that? Well, presumably I've joined together the sentence A is S with the sentence existential Y Q, or sorry, existential Y has some relation Q to A. Right? And then they're conjoined. Presumably also prior to the existential at line 6, there was the generalization. So maybe I go ahead and say that. So it's going to likely be, let's say QBA, right? So remember what we've talked about before, namely the benefit of jotting off to the side. So pencil paper approach here is taken here. Jotting stuff off to the side so you can see where to go. And I say that largely because it's easy with scratch paper. If you make an error, you just toss the scratch paper. Here, recycle that scratch paper. Here, right, you're going to have to make some changes in terms of getting these animals in subproofs. Okay. Next thing to think about is how you're going to start eliminating. So if you take a look at line 1, when you eliminate the existential, you're going to replace each iteration of the variable x with a name. And then when you go ahead to generate the universal elimination, there's no restriction. Sorry, hold on. Puppy alarm bells, doorbells. And then, so there's no restriction on the universal. And then, of course, there's the second existential that is going to need to be instantiated to a different name. Again, depending on which one you work first. Okay. What else do we know? Well, we know that we want to get S and Q together. Q is the consequent of the conditional that is nested in line 1. And we want to get S on its own, and S is the a conjunct from line 2. Right? So we can see that in order to get to this sentence, and right when it's populated the way we want, right? We're going to need to have this antecedent so that we can eliminate the consequent from the conditional. But before we can even do that, we have to break the conjunction apart. But before we can break the conjunction apart, we have to deal with line 1. Right? So why don't we just go ahead and start with the instantiation or the elimination of the existential at line 1. I'm going to try it again. Wish me luck, guys. Erg! No. Somebody, after all these years, I still don't know why I can't consistently, and I haven't found the pattern, consistently copy paste. If you find out, tell me because I want to know. Okay. Yeah. So far, so good.
Yes.
Now, what we know is that we're going to want to generate, right, what is now line 9 so that we can exit and assert, right, our existential claim. Okay. Why am I working a nested subproof? I'm thinking that I want to get both of these sentences in an order that will allow me to work on them, to do what we said. I mean, obviously, right now we can eliminate the conjunction, we can eliminate the right side of the conjunction sentence at line 3 and start working, but I don't want to peel off my universal quantifier until I have given out all the names that I need to give out for the existentials, right? Remember about that restriction on the existential elimination. We cannot use a name that already appears. So, all right. Now, notice that we've got, since we're using a different hypothetical name, B is the name given to S, and down here at line 7, A is the name given to S. It's not going to pose any problems for us because once we go ahead and offer up the instantiations that we need, right? Sorry, rephrase. When we go to instantiate, we can instantiate the universal to whatever name we want. Okay, so let's go ahead and eliminate. And eliminate again. The question is, should I eliminate the universal Y to the name A or the name B? Well, remember, I want Q all on its own, that such that I can then conjoin it with S. And it will likely make sense for me to eliminate the universal in such a way that facilitates that. Now, that's my thinking in advance. It may be the case that there is no required order. So let me just grab B. And if it turns out that I'm wrong, then I can fix it. And then I'm going to eliminate the left side of the conjunct at 4, which gets me Q, A, B. And then I also want SB. Now, let me go ahead and remind myself of what it was that I was looking for. So take a look at 8 and 9 and look at respectively 11 and 10. Right? So the order of the constants is different. The hypothetical names is different, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and generalize the line 8, and I'm generalizing it to Y. Oops. And notice what I'm doing. It might be useful to you to try this if you don't sketch off to the side. as you pull into the relevant subproof what you need from below, outside the subproof, like when we were doing a version of working off to the side, go ahead and delete the thing. And now we're going to conjoin. Oh, okay, I've got that. And now I'm going to generalize again. Okay, so on the assumption that I've got that right, I can now exit that subproof. I'm going to try it one more time, guys. Namely, darn it, grr. Okay, so let's hope that everything's in order. So what I didn't do at what is now line 13 is what I did initially for line 14, which is to set up, tell myself what I'm setting up. And I should have done that when I started, right, the existential elim from line 2. And remember, we've been doing this a fair amount, checking as we go. I'm going to make the font a little smaller so that we can get everything on one view. Oops, elim. Oh, where am I? Oh, conjunction elim. Whoopsie. All right. Did I make a mistake? Let's find out. Uh-oh. So let's look at where the mistakes are. So starting up here at line 1, formula is not well formed. Oh, okay. And this formula is not well formed. Thank you. And that formula is not well formed. Excellent. That one is not well formed. Does everybody see how I keep forgetting parentheses? Oopsie. And let's see. Don't need that. Okay. So which one? Sorry, let me make the font even smaller. Okay. So where are we? Existential. One support step beside it. Oh, hi everybody. So I'm looking at I'm looking at the very bottom of the Fitch window, and it says, sorry, let me make the font bigger. And it says this rule requires one support step be cited. And my thinking is, that's not true. Existential elim doesn't require one support step be cited. And then I finally go to look at what I actually chose. And I chose accidentally existential intro instead of elim. So we love Fitch. Fitch tells us all sorts of stuff. I did it again, you guys. Elim. Fitch tells us all sorts of good stuff. We love it when Fitch does that for us. Okay. Thank you, Lois. Can I just get a show of hands, a thumbs up, a clapping, something from folks, or verbal, from folks who say, I love it. This is great. I'm good. Couple. Okay, good. Wonderful, wonderful. And then how about just a heads up from folks, a thumbs up, whatever, from folks who say, well, I see what you're doing as you're doing it, but I'm still not 100% comfortable with kind of what I'm looking at, like how it is that I get the strategy that we employ, or the sub-strategy if we've got nested quantifiers. Anybody?
Could you reduce the font size so we can see the entire thing?
Oh yeah, Derive, sorry. I thought I did that, and then I realized once you said that I didn't. Actually, you know, let me do this. This is going to make it easier. And let me do something really quick. That's not what I meant to do. Hold on. How's that? Pretty good?
Yes, thank you.
Of course. Yeah, sorry it took me so long. I'm on extra slow-mo today. Okay, so I hope this feels comfortable to you for a couple reasons. One is using the blocks language gives us a way to picture that we don't have with just letters. That said, though, using the blocks language sometimes can throw us off. In other words, we forget that we need to focus on our connectives and our quantifiers. But again, I hope that the fact that you've got the blocks language makes you say, okay, I feel like I can read this sentence more easily, right? So sentence 1 says, there is at least one cube that's not large. And then the second sentence says all the tets are large. And the conclusion is, so there's a cube that's not a tet. And you'd say, well, yeah, of course, you know, there can't be any of them, right? Can't be any cubes that are also tets. Okay, so remember that here's a strategy that we want to employ when our conclusion is an existential and we've got an existential in our premises. 99 times out of 100, we want to set up existential elimination. Right, so let's say that it's A that's the cube that's not large. And what we're going for is the conclusion, some cube is not large. I keep forgetting my second parenthesis, right? So again, my advice, whether you're working an exercise that turns out to not take a lot of steps or does, it's a really good idea to tell yourself what your setup is, what your roadmap is, what your blueprint is. Right now you're in a really good position to start working on the elimination of the universal. Right? Alternatively, what you might say is, what I want to do is keep working backward, which is the preferred mode, right? So if I have A that's a cube and not large, then I have something that's a cube and not large. Oh, wait. Why did I write cube and not large when it should be tet, not a tet? Nobody corrected me. You guys just left me here all by myself. Very sad. Okay, so we generalize. And then we have to ask ourselves how we got the two together, right? A is a cube, and it's not the case that A is a tet, right? Such that we then can join them.
You also have to change line 9.
Oh
So it
yeah,
just says,
thanks, Derive. Okay, excellent, thank you, thank you. All right, so as we're working backward, right, we're saying this is what I need. Now, it should be the case when you see the negation at line 5, your first thought is, ooh, contradiction, contradiction, contradiction. I'm going to introduce the negation, right? So if this is what we want, right, we get started on the negation intro. And I bet most of you are already seeing, if not all of you are already seeing the way forward, right? Oh, what do we think? Thoughts as I'm working to, or as I'm just filling in the citations and justifications? What I'm hoping for you is this feeling of confidence. You say, yeah, this was great. This was super easy. Well, let's check and make sure everything went well. No, it didn't because I chose the wrong thing here. And then, of course, once again, I forgot my paren. Yeah, like I hope that you look at an argument like this and you think, very quickly about the strategy that you're going to use. And I say very quickly, not because speed is the goal, but what I mean is that you're so comfortable with your strategic thinking that that's the move that you make. You're like, oh, I see an existential in my conclusion, and there's an existential in my premises. Let me set up existential elim. Remember, worst case scenario is you try something that doesn't work, and then you can always back out and start over. Here's another, I hope, confidence booster. Okay, so go ahead and tell me if your strategy is clear. Okay, Dereje's got it. Anybody else? You clear about what you're going to do? Now, don't be put off by the fact that you have a negation, and this is one of the few times when you don't need to generate a contradiction, because you're flexible enough to know that that can happen. You love your negations. You definitely have no problem generating negations, but it doesn't mean that every single time you see a negation, you're going to, I said negation meant contradiction, doesn't mean that you're going to generate a contradiction. And then I forgot to finish this off. Okay. Okay. I hope this feels pretty comfortable. Thoughts on this one? I hope this also feels straightforward. You definitely want, so this is a baseline level of difficulty. This for us is considered a low level of difficulty. What I want to encourage you to do when you are practicing above the level of difficulty that is what we're expected to achieve in our class, that when you run into trouble, so you can't see your way forward, and you're working backward and you're working forward and you're pulling stuff off to the side, and it's like it's just not, you're not quote unquote seeing it, that you will try at least one of two things. One is go work on something else, just either another exercise in logic or just work on some other subject. Or kind of put all your work away, go take a walk, get something to eat, whatever. It's a version of just rebooting. So we talked about this a bit before we got sent home, right? I had said to you that when you're working on an exercise in an exam, if you need to kind of get up and walk away, do it. As long as you're not obtrusive, go for it, right? I think it's important for you to take advantage of that in this environment where you are, you've got a lot of time to work on a given exam. And so if you start the exam early enough and you do run into trouble, you can do the brain reset, right? You can do the brain reboot, work on something else, come back to it. Take a walk, come back to it. I find that when I do that, if I just give myself enough time to either rest or to digest sort of intellectually digest some new skills or some new concepts, then when I come back, it's easier. Deb and I were talking earlier about an exercise, and in fact, I think we should look at it together. We were talking earlier about an exercise from the book that, just it was, she got stuck, and we were talking about how frustrating it is that, the go-to thought that she had, which is a good go-to thought, just wasn't working in this environment, not because it isn't logical. It's a legit move that she wanted to make. It's because the exercise instructions said, don't do this, right? And so it's great when we are really good at thinking along certain lines, but then if we get stuck and there's another option for us, but we haven't thought our way through it, and so now we're just super stuck, it can be just really frustrating. And so it's good that our book wants us to be much more flexible than have just a single line of thought. But if we do get stuck, we need to find a way to unstick ourselves. So that's my advice. Deb, I don't think you would have had time to go back to the exercise, but do you want to, can I go ahead and open, not the one that you sent, but just open the exercise?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Fine.
It was 1332, right?